Hey there, everyone, and welcome back. I am joined again today by Peter, and we are going to take a look at some astrological themes and some tarot themes that are going to play out over the next quarter. So we're going to be taking a look at April, May, and June of 2024. I've got a featured astro event for each month to share, and Peter is going to tell us a little bit about some of the highlighted tarot themes that he's got in mind for these months. So welcome back, Peter.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy us kind of getting together with a little bit of tarot and a little bit of astrology for the quarter. So, oh, that's great.
Fantastic. So I know in astrology that April 2024 is a huge month. So I'm very curious to hear what your tarot take on April of 2024 might be.
Okay, well, and I'll kind of preface it by saying, you get to look at and sort of select the astro weather that you want to focus on here. There's lots of ways that I could go about playing with the tarot for this quarter. I could look at the sign correspondences. We've got, the sun going through kind of Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. So we have four cards associated with that. Could go into more detail, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just simply add up the digits of the year. So 2024 and the month. So, the fourth month, the fifth month, the sixth month, and I'm going to look at the major arcana card for that period. And the reason I did that is because those three cards together, and I'll kind of highlight that at the end, really have an interesting narrative that focuses on a nice kind of succinct package. So if we start with April, which is, where we're going to go, we've got the fourth month of the year, and we kind of add that to 2024. So we have 2024 plus 4, and it gives us 2028. We add those digits together, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 8, which gives us 12, which actually corresponds with the Hanged Man. So the Hanged Man is our card for the month of April. And what the Hanged Man allows us to do, it actually allows us to explore something from a different perspective. I always think of the Hanged Man as the Major Arcana's pause button. So often the word associated with the Hanged Man is suspension. So it really does allow us to pause and stop and then give us a chance to explore a different perspective. In some ways, an almost 180-degree view of the world. And I'm just going to hold the card up because, we're talking about a visual medium here. And when the Hanged Man is looking at the world, they're looking at it through the lens of up is down and down is up and right is left and left is right, except, and I'll just hold it up for one moment longer, there's no discomfort there. So they still, although their hands are bound, they still have access to all their faculties. They still have access to what I'm going to call the force, and I'm going to get into a nerd moment there. So for the nerds out there like myself, think about Luke Skywalker, who's hanging upside down in the ice cave, 1 foot, arms behind his back, uses the force to access his lightsaber. So not a question of discomfort from this particular card. What I want to highlight is it makes April a real time for us to stop and to think and to bring ourselves to ponder new pathways, new perspectives, new possibilities. So we're not uncomfortable here. There's no punishment. We're just thinking. We're just pausing and thinking. We're still able to do our thing, whatever our thing happens to be, while we're in this state of suspension. So again, keywords that, I'll focus on for April with the Hanged Man is, pause, suspension, and change in perspective. And I might even add the word radical change in perspective. How
Ah.
about the astrology of April?
Well, in some ways, I could just say ditto and leave it at that. I know I said I was going to speak about one thing each month, but I have to talk about two things very briefly for April because there are two of our kind of high level major astrological events, both happening in the month of April. First up, we have this very dramatic solar eclipse that is happening on Monday, April 8th. I know many of you have probably heard about it, and I'll be sharing some more info about that in more detail, but at least to include it here because a solar eclipse is a very dramatic astrological omen. this solar eclipse is a total solar eclipse, and in many parts of the world, or I shouldn't say many, but a big chunk, there's a big pathway where this eclipse will be visible. And so the bright sun in the middle of the day will darken. And that was considered to be actually a quite challenging omen in ancient times. You know, the sun was the source of light and life force, and to lose that light was considered to be obviously not great. And so with eclipses, we are thinking about agitation and things being unsettled. Normal patterns break when we're in an eclipse time. So what we like, and the solar eclipse is a special kind of new moon. So we'd normally have a regular new moon, but instead we're having an eclipse. So that's where we get this idea of interruption or disruption to the regular patterns of things. And I loved what you were saying, Peter, about the idea of suspension and looking at things from that different point of view. I think in an eclipse, on an eclipse day, or the 24 to 48 hours that the moon is moving through the sign where it will be eclipsed, it is a little bit like a state of just holding steady, of not really, this isn't the kind of new moon eclipse. Well, eclipses are not the kind of new moons where you would really want to do any intention setting or those big kind of beginnings that we often think about for a new moon. You want to give that a little pause through the eclipse and just kind of sit with things rather than rushing to do things. Notice where you might be agitated. Contemplate what you might want to change, but instead of rushing to do it right away, kind of sitting in that place of contemplation and reflection for the moment. So that's April 8th. And I think the eclipse is on the 8th itself, but the energy of that sort of just holding steady, treading water would be perhaps April 7th, 8th, and 9th, the whole time the moon moves through the sign of Aries, just depending exactly on where people are. So that's interesting, that sort of suspension and seeing things from different points of view. And the second thing is we have a conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus, which will take place in the sign of Taurus around the 20th and 21st of April. So when we look at 2024 as a whole, April really stands out as this very dramatic month. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is about radical perspective changes. So the idea of seeing things differently, dreaming up new adventures for yourself, wanting, being restless with things that feel restrictive or perhaps they're a bit boring because they're so familiar and routine, and then wanting to kind of shake things up, being curious about what you could do differently. That's very much Jupiter Uranus. And even though it's peaking, the energy of Jupiter Uranus peaks on the 20th and 21st of April, it is going to be with us for a number of weeks. We could say a good 4 weeks before and after that April 20th, 21st weekend. So some of the keywords that you're sharing about, like total overhaul of the way you think, or even with Jupiter Uranus, the things that you believe to be important for you, or the ways in which you find meaning in your life, they are changing. What used to give you meaning probably doesn't feel as meaningful or fulfilling now. And so you want to be open to what else might I be ready to explore to go forward from here. So there was a lot of connection with the way you were interpreting the Hanged Man card. It was really quite striking to see that.
Interesting though, as you talk about because the segues into May are interesting as well, especially if you talk about that conjunction and the period of time. If we do the addition of the card of the Major Arcana for May, we kind of have that 2024 plus 5, which gives us 2029. We add that together, we get card number 13, which is the ultimate card of endings, which, was a word I heard you refer to, which is the death card.
Right.
Big kind of scary card in the tarot, and yet, something that's completely necessary. As a matter of fact, in the recent course I just completed, when we touched on the Major Arcana, I actually referred to this card as the Great Emptier. Death doesn't mess around. It ends things. And, a lot of tarot practitioners would state, and myself included, that, it is a card of transformation. And I absolutely believe that there is an element of transformation, but I don't want us to get lost in in the softening of the message of the death card, because it is really about endings. And so
Mm.
this idea of the great emptier actually came to mind. And I don't know if you remember a book I had taken from the library called The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. And in the book, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but in the book, the main character is a vampire, so an immortal, not a genre I tend to go towards. And she sees the approach of Zenerbog, which she refers to as the god of endings. And I thought, wow, that idea of endings, and then also refers to them
Mm.
as the great emptier. And I thought, what a wonderful word to describe the death card. That really, really struck me. So in
Mm.
most iterations of this card, there is a real hint of transformation. I think about a vampire, for example, which is the penultimate example of death as transformation in literature. But we see this hint of transformation in a lot of visual representations of this card. Pamela Coleman Smith, in the card that I held up, the death card, if we look at the very back, there actually is that element of hope. There's the setting sun in the background. So there's the idea that another
Mm.
day is going to come. Yes, the sun is going down. Yes, we have an ending here. But at some point in time, we have a beginning. And there are other decks, more modern decks. I think of Joanna Colbert Powell's deck, the Gaian Tarot, which I love it. It has the image of the carcass of a bird with the shell of a boat, but they're surrounded by living grass and they're surrounded by vibrant water. So it has that focus of the ending, but that glimmer of hope of transformation that kind of an ending brings. So
Mm.
that idea of endings is really prominent in this period that we're talking about. The the idea that transformation is coming, but it's not there yet. So, I think of the transformation of the caterpillar into the butterfly. It's a beautiful transformation, but being a caterpillar has to end before the butterfly can emerge. So, May looks like a great time to focus on those endings. Let's ask these questions. What needs to go? What do I need to end as a preparation for this coming transformation? I know the sun is coming up. I
Mm.
know that the ending is not going to be permanent. That whatever it is changing into something else. Doesn't happen yet. We're actually going to leave some room for that in June, which is why I said this kind of 3-card narrative, to me is a beautiful package for April, May, June. May really is a
Mm.
time. Let's allow things to end. Let's leave space for transformation, and let's ask those questions about what it is from our perspective. Do we kind of need to end? Do we need to let go? How does that link to May from an astrological perspective?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I love what you were talking about there about the great emptier with the death card and the idea of needing to end something or empty something out before you can have the sunrise again. Astrologically, May is a month of some transition. So maybe there are some themes there.
Mhm.
And the big astro event that I'm thinking about is Jupiter, our big planet, is going to change signs towards the end of May. So Jupiter is currently in the sign of Taurus, and it's been in Taurus since May of 2023. Jupiter tends to spend about a year or 12 months in a zodiac sign. And around the 25th of May this year, Jupiter will end its time in Taurus and move into the sign of Gemini. And that sign change isn't explicitly so much about endings per se, but it does mark the completion of a 12-month cycle. So an energy trend that has carried us all through from May of 23 to May of 24. We're kind of bookmarking that or closing that down. And Jupiter goes into Gemini, where it's going to be from late May of 24 until June of 25. Jupiter in Gemini is much more active and expressive. It's busy. It is curious. It also has the tendency to be a little scattered or a little disorganized. And so May feels like a transition out of something that has maybe been a little steady or stable, or maybe sort of boring and kind of calm. And we're going into Jupiter and Gemini, which is definitely feels like a more of a vibrating. Jupiter in Taurus felt very calm, like time in a quiet garden. Whereas Jupiter and Gemini is like you're in a busy marketplace and there's a lot going on around you, like a big, open market of some kind. And so Jupiter and Gemini feels buzzy, it's interactive, it's expressive, it's faster paced. So that change, it's sort of, some of us will have really enjoyed the Jupiter and Taurus period because it's had more of a slower quality. And some of us have probably been frustrated by that slowness. So, the change is some of us will enjoy the buzzy, busy Jupiter and Gemini more than others of us will. But that is definitely a very, it's a astrological change that I think you're going to feel it like viscerally. The quality is so different and things are going to move more quickly once Jupiter comes into Gemini. So not maybe exactly the same, but definitely that idea of one thing changing into something different.
Interesting, because I don't want to say I dismiss the idea of transformation from death, but that concept of change really does come into play in the death card, which is the kind of the card of May. I'll shift to June though, because in some ways,
Yes.
June, yeah, June follow the pathway. June, we've got 12 was April, 13 was May. June is obviously card 14, which is Temperance, and
Mm,
it there are kind of, I'll say, three pathways that I would consider contemplating with Temperance. And the one that I'll get to at the end is the idea of almost temperance as balance or temperance as
mm,
moderation. But there are other things that word temperance really focuses on. So let's think for a second. We sort of have that idea of suspension in April. We're sort of shifting to the concept of ending, and the card Temperance is really about, well, what pathway are we going to take from that ending point? What is that transformation going to
mm,
look like? So we got the big change that happened, that big ending that happened in May. If we look at Temperance as its, word temper as in anger, then that first pathway, of temperance might be a very rising, like a rising of the fire, like temper as anger. So, temperance corresponds to Sagittarius. Sagittarius actually a fire sign. So we have that first piece
mm,
of temperance kind of saying, okay, I've had this change. How I'm responding to it is from the temper portion of temperance.
mm,
Not the only option, though. We have temper as a kind of a level of hardness. When we think about, a cooling metal, we talk about that process of to temper, a metal becomes less malleable. Um, we have that concept of hardening. So does the ending, the change that happened in May, instead of causing us to rise to temper as in anger, does it cause us to temper as in harden like a metal?
mm,
And then we have that third pathway. We have that idea of temperance as balance, as moderation. And here I'll hold up the card again so you get a sense. It's really shown in this card by the 2 feet. So 1 foot on earth, 1 foot in water. The idea of trying to incorporate, both worlds. Have we created that ending? Have we experienced that ending in May? And have we brought balance from the process of temperance itself? So if we take a look at those three things, temperance as temper from an anger perspective, from a fire perspective, if we look at temperance from the perspective of malleability to kind of hardness, or if we look at that
mm,
idea of temperance from that concept of balance, and moderation, they identify sort of three pathways to move kind of beyond the ending. So June is a month of kind of, let's say, self-check or to check in with others, especially those who have faced the challenge of an ending. How are they doing? Or if
mm,
it's you, how are you doing? What kind of things, are missing to be able to restore balance? What kind of tools
mm,
do we have at our disposal to restore that balance? How are we going to, to use the image of the card, balance both our fire and our water? How are we going to, balance our passions and our emotions, to sort of use the, elemental definition of both of those words from a tarot perspective? So I'll kind of summarize those 3 months. So we've got a period of time, sort of a pathway from April to May to June, that moves from pause and suspension to kind of an endings and kind of an emptiness to a restoration of sort of, of temperance and of moderation and of balance. So that kind of
Mm.
summarizes that quarter for us. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm coming at from a
From the
tarot
tarot
perspective.
perspective. It's interesting that theme of like temperance and one of the three options that you picked up about temper and anger, because the aspect that really stands out for me for June is involving Mars, which is the planet of
Mhm.
anger, frustration, assertiveness. And in June, around the 11th of June, Mars will be in Taurus and it will make a very dramatic square aspect to Pluto in Aquarius. So we've got this Mars square Pluto aspect. And this is an aspect about exploring anger and frustration, kind of allowing those irritations or those kind of boiling over moments to be clues about power dynamics that we need to maybe get deeper into, or we need to make some adjustments around. This is a very kind of pressured aspect where there is some challenge or competition that comes through. It talks about this sort of pushing energy and then meeting resistance or hitting a road bump and having to negotiate or navigate that sort of pressure point or that testing point as you're trying to either be assertive or push forward and create momentum. So I really felt that was interesting that that was one of the options from the tarot card that is coming up for June of 2024. That Mars Pluto aspect, it's very strong around the 11th of June, maybe two days before and after. It simmers down a bit, but it does kind of stay in the background for a big chunk of June and probably even a little bit into July. And so that's interesting that both tarot wise and astrology wise, there are some themes at different points in June, at least, around needing to acknowledge where and how you get angry and then to explore maybe where that's coming from. And because Mars is square Pluto, to think about, do I feel like I don't have power or control here? And am I angry about that? Am I literally being controlled or manipulated by someone? Am I being too pushy in a situation? All of those slightly uncomfortable dynamics around how to be empowered without overpowering those around us. And I think getting into that dynamic is a part of that Mars Pluto aspect around the 11th of June. So lots of variety. I
Yeah.
feel like this quarter has a lot of different things going on, both with the tarot and the astrology. When I look at it, I don't know if you're the same, Peter, with the tarot. When I look at it from the big picture astrologically, I'm like, never a dull moment in this particular quarter. Is that something that would sort of be a summary point for you from the tarot as well?
Yeah, it certainly would. It would be, there's always something kind of going on, and when I go back to that three-stepped pathway, because I chose to use three sort of cards to highlight the month of May, or the month of April, May, and June. Yeah, there really is no time where there's nothing happening. And then
Mm,
some of the things we didn't look at, chose not to look at, would be some of those sort of smaller cards that would come into play. The decans in each of the signs. So there is always something going on. Never a dull moment is a great summary statement for April, May, and June from a tarot perspective as well. So
yeah. Yeah. So, and to me, that feels like it could be exciting and electric and a lot
mhm.
happening. And it could also be a little bit frenetic or a little bit chaotic because, so much is moving and churning.
Yeah.
And so, I wish everyone all the best as you navigate that. And hopefully you can stay in touch with those little touchstones of like grounding or calm that help you all. Peter, so tell us about what you've got going on tarot-wise. Where can people find out more about you and your work with tarot? And do you have any courses on tarot coming up that you want to let our listeners know about?
Yes. So best place to find out about what's going on, especially from a course perspective, is my website. So that's peterwhitetarot.com. I have a series of courses that I kind of refer to as the Learning the Tarot series. The first one already completed, Beginner's Journey. The Minor Arcana is well underway, and that will be followed by the Major Arcana, then putting it together, then the history of the tarot, and these kind of 5 courses will create a really nice package for people who are looking to deepen their knowledge of the tarot in a, I'll say, slow and methodical way. So it's really geared towards people who have very little, even no knowledge of the tarot, but have a deep curiosity. So they would start with the beginner's journey and kind of move their way through. All of that information is available on my website. The other thing I would add is, as we talk about sort of the energies of the cards, if you're looking for something that is more specific to you, if it's questions around, whether it's wisdom or guidance, um, you know, or questions that you have, consider a consultation. That's something as well I'm happy to do. Have a variety of times and price points to suit everyone's needs. Also can find that on my website, peterwhitetarot.com. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, that sounds so exciting, and how wonderful that you're now teaching tarot so people can have an opportunity to go through this material with you. For me, I have got ongoing chart interpretation courses happening in uh, April. The course is all about moon phases and fixed stars in the birth charts, and getting deeper into some of those signatures about personality. You can find out more details on my website, kellysastrology.com, to sign up for that. And for the first time online, I'm going to be teaching a couple of ancient timing techniques in a small scale group mentoring, which starts March 27th. That is for intermediate and advanced students. And it's ideal if you want some extra timing tools to add to your toolkit for predictive astrology. I'm going to be teaching about the techniques of minor periods and ascensional times, which sounds a lot more complicated than it is. It's an incredibly simple technique to begin to work with, and you can do so much with it. So that group mentoring info is on my website as well, kellysastrology.com. And Peter, did you say your website name?
I did, yeah. So
Yeah.
peterwhitetarot.com.
peterwhitetarot.com. I should remember that. Okay, so that's where you can find out more about what each of us have going on. And Peter, thank you so much for joining me again. I know we have some very dedicated listeners who really enjoy the tarot and astrology combo, so it's great to be here with you doing this again.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really do enjoy our conversation. So thank you for the opportunity. And we'll look forward to doing it again.
Yes, yeah. When we check back in the middle of the year for, I mean, I think of it as the summer quarter, but it'd be the winter quarter for our friends and family in Australia. But we will
Correct.
see you all next season, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.